What's up, horror fans? It is time for part two of our New Year's review marathon. Me and Danny over there, Danny Porkel, Dr. Zayas God, are the Lastercast. I'm Pete, and we are going to be talking about Castle Rock, which was a show that came out in 2018, and it is like set firmly in Stephen King's universe. I'm going to say right off the bat that even though it's got elements from many different Stephen King stories, it's set in one of his primary locations. I feel like the show actually doesn't feel like a Stephen King show or movie. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first off, Danny, I want this conversation to start off with us talking about why we chose to cover this show. And then also, why do you think they made this show? Because this show, I'm like watching this show and I'm like, what was their ultimate goal? Like, what were they like? Yeah, we're gonna make this particular story because ... So, do you think you have an answer for that second question?
I think for the second question, I think that for 2018, I think they kind of over we my whole theory about this show, weirdly, being that it's a show that involves time jumps and weird things with time, this show feels like a show out of time.
Yes, thank you.
If
Good.
you would have said to me, if I did not, obviously, if it was not right there on Netflix when I clicked on it, and you would have said to me, when do you think this show came out?
Right,
I would have said 2008 to 2009.
right,
And when I looked at it and I went, wait, this show came out 6 to 7 years ago
right,
and had a fresh out of Pennywise makeup Bill Skarsgård in it.
right,
It feels like, and the characters and the actors in this show, it's like Melanie Linsky right before Yellow Jackets,
right,
Bill Skarsgård right in between the It movies, back before he was really, no pun intended, the It guy in Hollywood. Um, you have you have all of these actors like Jane Levy. I think this is before she started doing Jane's Zoe's extraordinary playlist. I know Athena
okay,
loved that show. That was like a show that Athena watched. Like, this was obviously Terry O'Quinn right after Lost. Even though he's like only in it for a couple episodes. And it really feels, and to your question of like, what do I think the filmmakers thought? I think in 2018 they overestimated the worldwide appeal of Stephen King,
okay,
which weirdly again places this show out of time, because if this show came out this year, it would
yeah,
have been a big fucking hit.
right, right,
Which answers your first question, why are we covering this? Because Netflix, and I think Netflix did this on purpose,
yeah,
put this show up. I had forgotten this show had ever existed.
right,
They put this up right in the middle of what is arguably the hottest Stephen King has ever been. You just look at this year.
yeah,
You have had some critically and financially successful Stephen King theatrical adaptations: The Monkey, The Long Walk,
right,
Life of Chuck.
yeah,
I'm definitely missing one, and it's probably the
Running Man,
biggest. What?
Running Man,
Oh, The Running Man. Yeah. That's four film adaptations that were all either commercially or critically, or in some cases both, successful. And then you have, of course, It Welcome to Derry on HBO, which was one of their biggest hit shows.
yeah,
Um, and I think that while America was talking about It Welcome to Derry, Netflix was like, hey, let's throw this lost Stephen King universe show from 7 years ago that it feels like nobody watched or knows exists. And
Correct.
let's throw that up onto Netflix and see if we catch any fish. And here we are, fish.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
They got their hooks in us. Okay. Brilliant point about how it feels like a show out of time, right? Because watching this, to me, it feels like the Fantastic Four movie with Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis. It feels like Blade, where it's like, oh, we're not exactly in that phase yet.
it's
But
Marvel before the MCU.
right. But it's so weird because it's like so ambitious, right? Because the setting of Castle Rock itself, it's fucking crazy. Like if you look up all the books that are connected to Castle Rock, it's like Cujo, The Dead Zone, Needful Things. Like Sheriff Pangborn is one of the main characters in Needful Things.
He is.
You know?
He's the lead. He's the hero of that book. He's also in the Dead Zone. He's
Right.
also in. He's in numerous story. The Dark Half. He's in the
Yeah.
Dark Half. He's been played by. He's played in this show by Scott Glenn, who I always love Scott Glenn. He's such a good fucking actor.
Agreed.
But he was played by Ed Harris in Needful Things.
Yep.
I feel like it's gonna. I feel like I'm gonna look up who played him in the Dark Half and in the Dead Zone, and I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, of course it was that guy. But like, yeah, Alan Pangborn is a. I mean, there's literally a character in this show named. What is her name? Jane Torrance? No.
Jackie Torrance.
Jackie Torrance. There's a character in this show who very clearly has The Shining. There is a even the actors that were picked for this show, Sissy fucking Spacek, Carrie is a main character in this show. Obviously, Bill Skarsgård. I will say, and this is I'm sure this is going to be a highly controversial opinion. I think this is the Bill Skarsgård that I love. I think he is so creepy in this show. I think he's better in this show than he is in it, because I think he's a good-looking man who also happens to look incredibly fucking weird. And listen, you can be both. You can be a very good-looking human being who also happens to have like a crazy eye or a faraway glance. And his quiet demeanor on this show, the way he lumbers, the way he keeps one shoulder down. Do you notice that as he walks throughout this show?
Yes.
He almost to me resembles Jacob Elordi's Frankenstein monster in a way.
I see that.
And he has those gigantic expressive eyes that you never know what's going on behind them. And in this show, you really never know what's going on behind them. And he was so creepy. But then you also have, just for fun, you have Terry O'Quinn, who he was in Silver Bullet. Melanie Linsky, of course, who's been in like a ton of genre stuff and who we love and talk about all the time on Yellow Jackets. Even Andre Holland, who plays Henry Deaver, his son, Wendell, is played by the young Mike Hanlon from It Chapter 1. So there's like a Bill Skarsgård, there's like a Pennywise young Mike Hanlon reunion in this show.
Right.
It's what's weird, but what I think this show did wrong back in 2018.
Yeah.
And when I say they overestimated the appeal of Stephen King, is that they didn't make a Stephen King adaptation.
No.
They took the world of Stephen King from really his Castle Rock universe, like you said, is a lot of his earlier books up until about the early to mid 90s. Because Needful Things is supposed to be the last Castle Rock story. And I think that was 93-ish. I know the movie came out in 93 with Ed Harris. So so that book probably came out in like 91, I want to say.
Sure, sure.
So, but what the show does is I think it overestimated Stephen King's appeal of like, if you said I'm making a Cujo show or a
Yeah,
Salem's Lot show or a, people are going to be like, oh, that's that great Stephen King book that I read. This is
right.
like, oh, have you heard of Castle Rock?
Yes,
We're going to mention the last name of the character on from The Shining that you remember. We're going to
right,
give a character similar abilities to Danny from The Shining without ever saying the word Shining.
right,
We're going to have this weird divergent storyline where there are two characters, one of them a young black child and the other Bill fucking Skarsgård, who are playing the same person and who end up in the same universe with each other in different universes. And so I think that had this show come out in 2025 and
yeah,
had it sold itself of like from the mind of Stephen King, like you love Stephen King adaptations. Now
right,
go deeper into his world. And like
right,
obviously we haven't even mentioned like the whole show is centered around Shawshank Prison. And I
right,
know that like what's her name? Annie Wilkes is a main character in season 2, which we're gonna get to.
right,
So because it's not a direct adaptation, I don't think the show found an audience because people
right,
didn't know what to even make of it. And then it does get very sci-fi, very confusing, very time jumpy. And if you're not like into it right away, I can totally see why people, when this was on, and you're supposed to show up next week to watch it, may have tuned out. I think what helped me get through it was I kept letting Netflix go next episode,
right,
and I got into it because I was binging it.
right. Okay, but so let's go along with your point of why it didn't take off, right? Because I think it has the trappings of Stephen King stories, but it doesn't have the feel of Stephen King. It's kind of like in Ready Player One, where they have this scene where they go into The Shining, and it's like it's got the things of The Shining, but it still feels like a Steven Spielberg adventure. Like this
Yeah.
feels kind of like a ABC channel time thriller story that's kind of dark and violent. Now, I wanted to, for a second, just talk about the different layers of Stephen King stories, or like when you see a Stephen King adaptation and it feels like a Stephen King book. Because you and I are big Stephen King fans. We've read a bunch of his books. There are things that, like, when you read it, when you see it in a movie, you're like, that's Stephen King. Like, I've gone on this channel before and I've said, like, Doctor Sleep is like the most fucking Stephen King adaptation I've ever seen, right? It like feels like Stephen King, right? Um, I feel like Stephen King, what happens is you have characters that have like a traumatic past, which you have in this. But what happens is, and we got this a ton in Welcome to Derry, but almost not at all in this show, is that the characters aren't like literally haunted by their past. I understand that they are like emotionally haunted, and you could tell the toll that they're experiencing. But like usually in a Stephen King story, a character has some kind of like nickname or a specific like thing that they see that's connected to something horrible in their life, right? The like beep beep Richie, for instance, like like that kind of thing where it's like the guy, like the character stutters, and so they say this thing to him, or like the sparrows fly again. That's the thing that's said in the dark half. There's always like these little things that like linger on, and it's so effective for the atmosphere and the creepiness of it. Is the weird imagery that's associated with these traumatic events. There really isn't that. Like Bill Skarsgård himself is the weird thing, but it doesn't have that Stephen King vibe. And then like you have rural characters in this, like especially Alan Pangborn, right? And Sissy Spacek's character, but the characters themselves don't really feel like Stephen King characters. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the Stephen King characters have a very specific way of talking, and they like point out stuff like they just they say weird phrases. It just doesn't feel like Stephen King. Like Flanagan is so good at capturing the essence of Stephen King in his adaptations. That's why he might be the best at it out of everybody. Rob Reiner, who you mentioned last episode, like he did Misery and Stand By Me, right? He did both of those. Yeah, like he can get it. This, it's like we got the Stephen King setting, but it's not really. It doesn't feel like Stephen King. Do you agree with me on that, or disagree?
I think that there's elements of the show that feel King-ish, but
Okay.
character-wise, I think that the character that I ended up liking the most, and I think it's just because I love her so much, is Molly.
Yeah.
I don't even know if she's in the second season. I don't know if anybody from this season is in the second season. I don't know if it's like a completely different set of characters.
I think it's a different story, but I know that Bill Skarsgård actually shows up in the next season.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I think that there are, like you said, like traumatic, like kids who have traumatic issues who grow up and then they're dealing with the past trauma. That is a Stephen King trope of that we talk about with It and with Stand By Me and all these other stories. And I feel like you do see that a lot. I also really liked the parts of the show that I loved were Bill Skarsgård when he's called the devil earlier in the show. And before we find out who he is later on, I started to think like, what if the shows, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the Twilight Zone episode, The Howling Man.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I was like, what if the devil doesn't remember? What if the devil had amnesia?
That's cool. Yeah.
And like, what if the devil doesn't remember that he's the devil? And everywhere he goes, horrible things happen that
Yeah.
he can't explain because he doesn't understand that he's the cause of it. And I started to think like, is that what this show is? Is this show about how they've captured the devil and then they let him out and he like havoc is wreaked on this town without him realizing that he's the cause of this?
Yeah.
And I was really liking that idea until I realized I kind of made that up in my head because you find out. But like there is like the character of Henry Deaver, and as you will see as you go through this, spoilers for Castle Rock, a show that went off the air 6.5 years ago. As you find out that there are two Henry Deavers, and that the kid, as he's known in the credits, Bill Skarsgård is Henry Deaver from like an alternate reality.
Right.
You, I, the fact that like both Henrys, wherever they go, horrible things happen. I think there's like a really cool story there.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a minute, is this whole thing of the schisma, the voice of God. That Stephen King has done cosmic horror before. He sticks to cosmic horror in like in some of his short stories, in like the big short story compilations.
Yes.
But I was actually looking online because I was like, what is the word? It's funny because I looked up, is the schisma from a Stephen King book? And one of the first things that I saw on Google was, um, you know, what, but like, like when like you type in something and it reframes the questions that have been asked. And it's like, what Stephen King book is the schisma from? So like other people thought that,
Right.
and it's not, but a lot of people compared the schisma to like the Thinnies in the Dark Tower universe.
Yup. Yes. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's another thing that like I like it. I think because I'm a Stephen King fan, because I've read The Dark Tower,
Yeah.
all 7 books.
Right.
I like that idea. I don't know if it came across well in the show, especially if you're not the biggest Stephen King fan, or maybe you're a fair weather Stephen King fan who maybe you read it back in the late 80s. Maybe you read The Shining and The Stand 30, 40 years ago, and then every once in a while you'll watch a Stephen King a movie based on his work.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that idea came across, and I thought the finale kind of fell flat in trying
Yep.
to summarize that, like
Hmm.
complete that arc.
Yep.
That was probably the most disappointing part of the show for me because I'll be honest, I was really enjoying from probably episodes 2 through 9. I was really enjoying the show. I thought episode 1, obviously, let it, tell its story, go in slow, do your thing. And I
Yeah.
thought from like episode 2 to episode 9, I was like, man, I'm really tired. All right, maybe I'll start another episode. Next thing I know, I've watched 2 episodes in a row, an hour and a half's gone by. And then the finale really kind of fell flat for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it did a good job of explaining or really bringing the story to a fair conclusion, especially if you're going to go off and do another story in a second season. I
Yeah.
thought there needed to be a better ending to the season. Um, so yeah, it really, I feel like the show itself feels like a Stephen King story. Like the TV show Out of Time feels like a
Ah,
short story that Stephen King could have written.
yes.
Um,
But you know what though? I really think that if we just walk through what actually happens, I don't mean recap the season, but like if we essentially walk through what happened in the story itself, if I explain it to you and you say to me, yeah, that is the case, or you're wrong, Pete, I think that it'll be more satisfying, right? Because this is my take on the show. You tell me if I'm wrong. Essentially, we're dealing with 2 different timelines. There's 2 Henry Deavers. In one timeline, Henry Deaver is a baby that dies, and then his parents adopt an African American boy. That's our main character. That's the one that we're following for the majority of the show. Then in another timeline, the baby does not die. Now, that's one thing that's what we'll talk about. We'll put a pin in it, but like, there's a fucking scene where a woman kills a baby with a coat hanger, and then the baby comes back to life, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I watching? That's actually his father. His father's this pastor. His father comes back to life as a baby. But in the show, the baby comes back to life as well. So that's the other Henry Deaver. That Henry Deaver grows up to be Bill Skarsgård. He's got his own life. He's doing like research into Alzheimer's. And then essentially what happens is the Bill Skarsgård Henry Deaver crosses over into the world of the African American Henry Deaver. So you have the son that never died and grew up, and then you have the adopted son who replaces the dead baby, and they essentially like crisscross, and that's where all these problems kind of stem from. And what's really really interesting is that in the timeline where the son never died, the Bill Skarsgård timeline, the African American boy accidentally crosses over into his world and is kept in a cage for a couple of days. In the African American son's timeline, the adopted son's timeline, he crosses over, Bill Skarsgård crosses over, and he's kept in a cage for years by Terry O'Quinn. Did I get that right, or am I wrong about any details?
yes, I think that is basically yes. But the show focuses almost completely on the young African American boy Henry Deaver
Right.
for the first 8 episodes
Right.
until you find out in episode 9 that Bill Skarsgård is actually Henry Deaver from a different timeline. And they
Right.
meet in the woods because the father is the town preacher who is crazy and
Yes.
abusive and believes that he is hearing in the woods what they call the voice of God. And what we find out from another character is something called the schisma,
Right.
that only certain people can hear. And he is obsessed in one timeline with having African American young, like 12-year-old Henry Deaver hear the voice of God. He keeps taking him out in the woods every night over and over again. And in that timeline, something happens where the father is left in the middle of a blizzard. He's left like mortally wounded, and Henry disappears, and he just shows up 11 days later on a frozen lake, rescued by Alan Pangborn, the sheriff.
Right.
In the other timeline, um, Bill Skarsgård wanders off into the woods as an adult, his mom having been set free of uh, her husband, and he encounters young Henry in the woods.
Yeah.
But then there's also, the idea that he he's Bill Skarsgård's Henry goes back to his father's house after his father dies
Right.
alone, and he
Right.
finds Henry in the cage and frees him.
Right.
And both times Melanie Linsky is the next door neighbor who plays this woman Molly, who has a very shining-esque ability
Right.
that gets very strange at some points, where like she's like 11 years old and she's like, I saw you. She's like, I saw you touching yourself.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like,
And she fucking kills his dad too. But like, we can go into that in a second too. But I really need to get across the point that episode 9 was so jarring to watch, because everything that I just explained to you, everything that you sort of added to that, you figure it out over time. And I think you kind of even have to do a little research on the internet to make sure it all makes sense. But like episode 9 was so different and such a shift that I kept going back on Netflix and I'm like, wait, am I in another season? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is so
it is.
different.
And here's and again, here's part of the problem. I think that you and I, who I would venture to say from our conversation so far, I think you enjoyed this show at least a little bit.
Yeah,
And I enjoyed this show really up pretty much until a fairly disappointing finale, season 1, that is.
yeah,
And here we are still going, wait, so let me get this right. Is
yeah,
this what happened with this and this? And we have the ability of 7 years worth of hindsight, and tons of like people on Reddit who have deep dive shit and articles that are written about this.
right,
And again, if you were one of those people in 2018 who are like, oh, Castle Rock, this is a show set in a Stephen King universe, maybe I'll check it out. I could totally see you midway through season 1 being like, I don't even understand what the fuck's going on.
right,
I don't care anymore.
right, right.
And usually I'd be like, no, give it a second. But like, again, then it comes back to the idea of like, well, we also have the advantage of watching it on Netflix, where we can
Right.
binge through it, boom, 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 and we don't
Right.
have to wait 6-7 days for the next episode.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, the plot itself is kind of convoluted, and it requires like you to think that like one character is stepping into another reality and then being replaced by another. That's convoluted. But then there's these details that are added that make the story more complicated, but they also are like juicy, exciting details. Like you have this couple that takes over the house of the preacher, right? Like they take over the preacher's house, make it into an Airbnb.
No, that was Terry O'Quinn's house. That was
Oh,
the warden's
I'm so
house.
sorry. Yes, the warden. I'm so sorry. Right. So they take over his house, and the husband like here's this couple getting on their first guests, and he just fucking slaughters them right away. It's so weird because it's like one episode, and then the main character, the African American version of Henry Deaver, goes to that house, and he gets attacked by them. Then Jackie Torrance comes in and saves the day with an axe. So it's sort of like a positive version of Jack Torrance, and that cracks me up. Like that character's fun, but she seems so like removed from everything else that's going in the story, and it's
She's
kind of weird.
totally in the show because they wanted to have a character named Jackie Torrance using
Right. Exactly. And then the thing that kind of cracks me up, right? Because isn't it in the Shining book that Jack doesn't use an axe, right? He uses a croquet mallet,
a
right?
croquet mallet. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, okay, the Shining version, whatever. Who gives a shit?
I
Right?
also like. I also think, but like, so like, it's funny that that whole thing felt so disconnected to everything else.
Right.
But then the creepiness of the fact that the former warden, the show starts. I think it's the first thing we see on the show is Terry O'Quinn, an actor who by 2018 was like royalty because of Lost, because he
Right.
was John Locke. And he gets into his police car, ties a fucking noose around his neck, and drives off the side of like a quarry, committing like grotesque suicide. And then you find out that as the warden of Shawshank, he felt this religious like need to imprison Bill Skarsgård in a cage in like a water tank deep in the prison. So like, and in that house, he has all these paintings of Bill Skarsgård that he's done over 25, 26 years. And it's like super creepy. There's so many really creepy things that happen on the show. There's the one episode that I loved where Sissy Spacek is talking to her grandson, and she's telling him about how she's living like basically because she has Alzheimer's, she feels like she's living in multiple timelines, and that she has this like old chess set, and she stashes the chess pieces around so that if she sees them, she can go, okay, I'm living now. That means I'm living now. And I thought that whole part was great. That whole episode was great, and Sissy Spacek is fantastic. I thought in this show, yeah, like I thought the acting overall was really good. I thought the show was really creepy at points. I think that as a horror themed show, it does a lot of like scary and creepy things, and it alludes to a lot of good ideas. I just
it has some excellent shots too. Like one of my favorite shots is such a disturbing one, but there's one part where the preacher father, you're hearing one of his recordings, and he's talking about the crazy shit that's gone on in Castle Rock, and he's like, then there's that time the school bus got hit by a train, and they show the school bus get hit by a train, and it's this like, you know, sky high view of the train hitting the school bus. You're like, oh my God. And I just really love that fucking shot. There's
you know what's interesting that you bring that up is that this show, 7 years before it Welcome to Derry, uses a lot of, and maybe it's because it chapter 1 had just come out in 2017, but it does use what feels like a lot of those drone shots, like coming up over the entire town, and you get this almost like view of like a map from above of what the town of Castle Rock looked like, and it and how like and as the history nerd in me, it's like you have all this history of Castle Rock being this town that uh where there's these horrible events that have taken place and all of this death and you know it, I feel like it's funny. I'm interested now. I'm almost more interested in watching uh season 2 because
Yes.
season 2 seems to focus on, at least from the preview, seems to focus on Annie Wilkes. And
Right.
I'm like, maybe they ditch the sci-fi-ish time jumping multiple universes and maybe they just do like 10 episodes of like good old-fashioned serial killing.
Yes.
And I think that might work, but especially Lizzie Kaplan playing Annie Wilkes. I love Lizzie Kaplan. So
Right.
I'm definitely interested in watching the second season and coming back and talking to you about it. But I
Yeah.
agree with you that it is a very strange show.
Right.
And for
Well,
both good and bad.
yeah. Well, I mean, and one thing, because it kind of sounds like you're kind of wrapping it up, is like I want to just point out that they acknowledge like all the Stephen King stuff that's happened, and so this does feel like it could be a continuation of all the adapted Stephen King works. Like Cujo happened, The Dark Half happened, Shawshank Redemption happened. All these things happened. Alan Pangborn, he's alive by the end of Needful Things. Like this could have been the continuation and then end of his life, before it happens. The one thing that throws me off is the Annie Wilkes thing, because it's like, okay, well, maybe everything happened, but Misery hasn't happened yet. And
Yeah.
so that's, The Shining happened. They referenced The Shining directly in this, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean,
what I like,
maybe maybe season 2 is set in the past. I don't know.
right. And so what I do like though is that, they're implying that Bill Skarsgård's the kid. By keeping him imprisoned, it kind of makes the madness go away while he's in prison. And then him coming out makes the madness start to bubble up and come out. And there's a great, great fucking line. They say something like this a couple of times in the show, but in the end there, they talk about how they're like, were you a monster always to begin with? Or did this town bring it out of you? Does this town make monsters? Like the implication is like, is this a cursed place? Or is it just a place where there's bad people that live here? And I really like that. That actually in itself is a very Stephen King thing, which is like, well, is it this supernatural monster that's the evil thing? Or is it this bad person that's the evil thing? That might be the core of Stephen King right there.
Yeah. I think the show had a ton of really cool ideas. Like I love the idea of a somebody like Lewin Gaunt in Needful Things is
Right.
basically the devil.
Right.
He
Yes.
he is basically the devil. He opens up a small shop in a small town and he makes devilish bargains with you where I'll give you the thing you want the most, the thing that you need, and in exchange you will do a horrible thing to somebody and it will tear the town apart. I love the idea of a town being torn apart by like an evil that may not be evil, or like a character that isn't actually doing anything but their mere presence. Like
Yep.
there's that amazing scene where he lumbers into this house where a family is having like a birthday party for their child,
Right.
and the camera just focuses on him in the background sitting like really creepily in the dark, and you just hear it go from like happy birthday to, oh, that's the only thing you got him, oh, you've always been such a bitch, don't hit our child. And then you just hear like screaming and crying and you're like, oh, they just killed each other and he's just sitting there and his
Right.
presence led to that.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
why?
Right.
And that's where I think the show inevitably failed for me. Was it I know we don't like when exposition, but I do like some explanation once in a while, and I don't think this show did a great job of wrapping things up in the finale. I'm interested to see how they do in chapter 2. I almost said season 2.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, me too. You think that we can cover those 10 episodes within a week's time?
Uh, I mean, I feel like once I get into it, I'll probably watch a couple episodes a day. So uh, we could lay it. We could put it on the schedule for next week.
Sweet, sweet, sweet. So we got that, and then we also have something else big coming up. You want to tell them, Danny?
Well, yeah. So we are recording this on January 2nd.
Yes.
So in about 2 weeks, we're gonna do our top 10 of 2025. We're gonna try to fill in as many blind spots as we can for 2025 horror movies and get our lists out there. And then yeah, and then from there we have whatever the new slate of 2026 horror is, starting with, I'm assuming 28 years later, Bone Temple. I know Shudder's today's Friday, so Shudder probably put out or is putting out its like first block of new stuff for 2026 starting today and going into next week.
Nice, man. Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, you guys just check around. If you liked our discussion on Castle Rock, I'd actually really like to hear what you guys thought about the first season. I'd like to know like your theories about it. Like if you could make more sense of it than I did and Danny did, that'd be fucking awesome. If you could subscribe to the channel, that'd be even more fucking awesome. Danny, we actually hit 900 subscribers, man. Did you know that?
I did. I saw that. It. I know it's not a lot in the big scope of things, but the fact that 900 people in the world care what we have to say about movies and television shows is crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thanks, guys. It means a lot. Happy New Year.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. I usually throw in some kind of sex related pun here at the end, but I don't have any. So, yeah, we'll see you guys next time. I'll have one.